Thank you.
Your talk now.
And thank you to all of you for coming together here and thinking about sustainability and thinking about our future. We children and youth of Plan for the Planet, we are active mainly by planting trees now since nearly 7 years. Because globally, we children and youth, we see two main problems. We see the poverty crisis, and we also see the climate crisis. We've got the poverty crisis, with about 30,000 people, mainly children, dying of starvation every single day. We've got 1 billion people globally living with less than $1 a day, and 1/2 of the world's population living with less than $2 a day. And at the same time, we also have the climate crisis. Because every day we take as much carbon out of the ground as it took 1 million days for the sun to store it there. And while we children understand that the adults know these problems, and that not just since a short time, but since 40 years, since the first sustainability, since the Club of Rome report, and since 20 years, since the first sustainability conference. We children don't understand why globally there's so little action to save our future. And every time we think about this, why is there so little action? We often end up with the example of the monkeys. If you let a monkey choose if he wants 1 banana now or 6 bananas later, the monkey will always choose the 1 banana now. And to us children and youth, it seems that many adults might think a little like these monkeys. And that is the problem we have globally. And at the same time, it seems that for most adults worldwide, 9/11 was the darkest day in history. At this terrible terrorist act, 3,000 people died. But for us children and youth, 12/11 is the darkest day in history. At the climate conference about 2 years ago in South Africa, in Durban. Because at that conference, there was a very simple goal: to get a follow-up protocol, a follow-up contract for the Kyoto Protocol, which ended last year. But instead of making a contract, which starts at the beginning of this year, the governments decided there should only be a contract in 2020, which means that in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 19, all countries can exhaust unlimited amounts of CO2. And this also means that the 2 degrees goal is probably impossible to reach. But this goal is incredibly important. It's not just from the politicians, but it comes from the climate scientists. And at this conference, the Canadian Environment Minister made the whole situation even worse. First, during the conference, he gave a beautiful speech. And at the conference, at his speech, already 6 youth from Canada stood up, and they said, "Turn your back on Canada." Or they had that printed on the back of their T-shirt and showed everyone, "Turn your back on Canada." But they were thrown out of the hall and out of the conference, and just a few days later, the Canadian Environment Minister returned home and announced that Canada is going to step out of the Kyoto Protocol. Just a few months before the Kyoto Protocol was going to end, Canada just decided to step out. Because in that contract, they promised that they would reduce their emissions by 7%. But instead of that, they went up by 35%. And they should have paid a fine for this. The fine was $12 billion. But to save that money, Canada decided to step out of the Kyoto Protocol. Does that mean our future isn't even worth these 12 billion euros? And globally, we children, we understood that we cannot wait for the adults to solve these problems. We have to take our future in our own hands. And this year, we have a very important anniversary of 300 years of sustainability. Not because we were sustainable in these 300 years, but because the word sustainability is now 300 years old. It originally comes from the foresters. Because the foresters, they plant trees all their lives, although they themselves do not have an advantage from these trees, or because they plant these trees for the generations after them. And they live from the trees the generations before them planted for them. And the best definition of sustainability we children and youth ever heard came from the indigenous people from North America. One of these people, he was called Sean. He told us that in their village, every time they make a decision, they first think if even the 7th generation after them would still support this decision. And only then they agree on doing something. And if we all thought this way today, then the world would probably look very differently. And in the last few years, we children and youth, we often asked ourselves what we would do if we were the heads of governments of the world. And at the end, we had a 3-point plan. The first point is planting trees. Our goal is to plant 1 trillion trees. We want to plant 1 trillion trees. That's a number with 13 digits, because that's the number of trees we have space for globally. Still having enough space for civilizations and also growing food, agriculture. And if we manage to plant these trillion trees, they would absorb 1/4 of the global human-made CO2 emissions. And to plant these trees, each person in the world would have to plant 150 trees. And the second point of our 3-point plan, how we would save our future, is that, of course, tree planting alone will not solve these problems. We also have to go down with our greenhouse gas emissions. We have to go to 0 emissions, actually, until 2050. But the great thing about this point is that we already have all the technology today which we need for 0 emissions. And the third point of our 3-point plan, how we would save our future, is that even until 2050, there's only a limited amount of CO2 we can still exhaust. And that's about 1.5 tons per person per year. And if someone wants to exhaust more, then they pay to the ones that exhaust less. And on a global level, we could use this system to fight poverty as well, to fight the global poverty crisis. And this is how we children and youth would save our future. And now I want to show you a few pictures, if I actually find the pointer. Here, I've got it right there. We children and youth, we started being active planting trees 6 to 7 years ago. And when we started, we thought we had to save the polar bear. But soon after, we understood it's not actually about saving the polar bear. It's about our future. This kid is not looking at his reflection in the water. It's drinking. And this is why we made the sticker, Save the Human. And one of the most essential parts of Plant for the Planet is that we try to educate as many children and youth worldwide to ambassadors for climate justice. So children and youth that will be active as well, fighting for our future. And all these children are educated at such called climate academies. Those are one-day workshops. They always start with a presentation from another child or youth that has already been educated at a different academy. After that, we all practice giving presentations ourselves. We plant trees at all these academies. We collect ideas to the various questions. For example, how do we organize a planting event? And then we make plans what we want to do ourselves in our schools and in our regions. And we present these plans in front of all the participants of the academy. And everyone that wants to get active gets a certificate as a climate justice ambassador. And in addition to planting trees, we try to convince people all around the world that something has to be done. And we do that, and we try to get governments active, governments to do something, and we try to get companies to get active and do something as well. For example, we went to various parliaments, like the Congress of Mexico, or the European Parliament, and we always presented our 3-point plan at all of these speeches. And we went to local governments, to mayors all around the world, and we're asking them to get active. And for example, with this one mayor in Mexico, we signed a contract that they would plant 150 trees for all the people in their region. So 200 million trees until 2020. And by doing this, we're trying to achieve the global trillion-tree goal. And we also wrote to all heads of governments of the world, asking them how they are planning to save our future. In letters, and we talked at the UN. But in addition to getting governments and companies active, we are also trying to convince the people all around the world that something has to be done for our future. For example, one thing we do is with our campaign, Stop Talking, Start Planting. We cover prominent people's mouths to show that something has to be done. For example, one such picture we did with a supporter, Prince Felipe from Spain. And one day after we did the picture, it was in all news. And not just in the newspapers, but on the cover pages. And another project some of us did is called the e-card. If you go on our website, you click e-card, you will get this window. Then you can upload a picture. If it doesn't fit, just upload another one. If it still doesn't fit, you can use the arrow keys and then send the picture to your friends. And each January, there are in many cities around the world, we've got the Christmas trees lying on the streets. And in these cities, we go around with the speech bubbles. These, they don't really make sense in English. They're German puns. This one says, if I had arms, I would be planting trees. Suche Partner zwecks Fortpflanzung. Yeah, looking for a partner for reproduction. It doesn't work in English, sorry. Retten Sie wenigstens meinen Stammbaum. Please save my family tree. And many of us children and youth demonstrated in many cities of the world. For example, in Berlin, during the climate conference in Copenhagen in 2009. And about 2 years ago, we wanted to start a project with the chocolate industry, but they didn't want to help us. So we said, then we'll make our own chocolate. And that's the Change chocolate. And it's now the most successful fair trade chocolate in Germany. Right now, we're also working on an app for the Change chocolate. So if you're around in the city near a store that sells the chocolate, you'll hear a beep in your pocket and you'll know where to go shopping. And then we asked the astronauts from the European Space Station if they wanted to try as well. And just a few days later, 12 bars of the Change chocolate were on board of the Albert Einstein to the International Space Station. And of course, we've got some chocolates for you as well. I think we actually have 1,700 chocolates. That should be enough right at the exit of this hall. And we also have the books from us children and youth. Everything would be all right, and Tree by Tree. in tree by trees in about 10 different languages. So you can all pick up the things when you go out, and if you want to support us, you can do that as well. So what you can do is you can just take out a business card and take out a pen. And on this business card, you can write a number. And the number is the amount of trees you want to plant until 2020. And then you can plant these trees yourself, or we can plant the trees for you for €1, 1 tree. Remember, our goal is 150 trees per person. No, just kidding. You can choose any goal, pick and take a business card, write a number on it. We will have big jugs at the exit. Just drop the business card in there, and we will send you all the information. It's very easy. Everyone can participate. Thank you.
The applause is yours. Felix Finkbeiner. Thanks a lot. So I have nothing more to add. And so you see, standing here with my papers, you have all those facts and figures in your head. That was quite amazing to share this with us. So I know that Jack Dangerman likes to talk with you a little bit here on stage. Jack, may I ask you to come up, to join us here? A short talk now about planting trees and using maps, planting trees. So who would like to start? You have a question to Jack?
Sure. Have you planted trees before?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, are we going to sort of ad-lib this little by little as a conversation?
Sure.
So how did you start this? I mean, how did you get enthusiastic about it?
It just started during a class presentation I had to give about the climate crisis. It was in 2007, after the warm winter. And I think my teacher confused weather with climate a little, and she asked me to give a presentation. And at that point, my favorite animal was the polar bear. And I found out about Wangai Maathai with all these wonderful activities, planting 30 million trees in Africa with many, many other women there in just 30 years. And so that was the idea that we could also get active and also start planting trees. And so we planted the first tree at my school, and it slowly went from there.
What did you do next?
We planted the first tree, and then actually already some media came and reported about it. So other schools in the area started planting trees as well, and then an older student made the first website for Plant for the Planet. And then we had a little competition between schools who would plant more trees, and then it grew. It slowly grew.
Did competition help?
Definitely.
It's interesting. How many of you have kids like this? I mean, it touches me. Yeah, I like planting trees. I mean, I planted thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. Every year I plant about 2,000 trees.
Great.
I start them from little acorns or little cuttings, and then I plant them, just as a hobby, actually. Now I have a bigger context that I can put it into. How many of you plant trees?
Wow.
It's quite a few.
Great.
How many of you plant a lot of trees? That's good. How many of you want to plant a lot of trees? I mean, you made a call to action, which is these people write it and they do it. That's really very motivational to everybody. Do you have anything else you want them to do?
No, I think that's the easiest step. Another great thing is we could work together with all of you, maybe organizing some academies wherever you came from in your countries, so we can have children and youth also active everywhere around the world planting trees for our future.
Everybody bought into that? How many of you would organize an academy? How many of you would organize an academy in your town?
Wow.
Few.
The best thing is maybe you can put an A for Academy on the business card, and then I'll contact you.
That's good. That's very good. One of the things Felix asked me when we were sitting down here is, where should I plant the trees? Isn't that the basic question?
Yeah, and we were thinking about that a lot because we've got these trillion trees we've set as a goal globally. But where can we plant these trees? And then a friend of us actually made a study. He's now studying at Yale University to show that these trees are possible. But of course, all these trees, we need a way to show it to the people, where these trees can be planted and how many trees can be planted and so on.
So I want you to think about that question. How many of you would support people like Felix figuring out where the trees should be planted? Because that's your field, right? How many of you do that? Oh, come on, really, I mean, a little more action here. I think that that's a real possibility, Felix, and I think the idea of standing up in the cloud, a place where every time somebody does a transactional update, they mark it with a device like this, and tracking it so they see the cumulative effort of all that work. But, you know, when Gary Mathai, who was a keynote speaker at this conference once, and an old friend of some of the people here in this room, immediately saw that it wasn't just tracking progress, it was also figuring out targets of where you plant the trees. So she built a huge GIS across Kenya and directed the women who did it with maps to show them exactly where they should target. And the reason why I'm asking the question is because you have the business logic in your head of being able to help these academies figure it out. And in that case, it's a little more difficult than a cloud connection. But I would really like to partner with you on it. I mean, who would actually like to do this? This is going to take geo-volunteerism. So why don't we put GV also on the card if you're interested in that? So how many of you are going to put in a card? And how many of you are going to mark on that card number of trees? That's just number of trees. And then A for Academy, and then GV. That's for the people who you really go after.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's a great pleasure to meet you, by the way.
Thank you.
Good luck. Another hand for Felix.
Felix, please stay here.
Okay.
Thank you, Jack. Felix, please stay on stage. We have also prepared something for you. We know that you got a lot of tables and numbers and figures about persons all around the world pledging trees and planting trees and so on. And we took those data and put it into a map, and we made the invisible visible. And Stefan Mendler made that job, and he will share with us his maps, and those maps will soon be available on your portal. And within the next year, in springtime, you will see a new dot in Cologne on the map. That is how we support you. So
Great.
Please, Stefan, go ahead.
Thank you, Gerd. In July this year, we got the data from Plant of the Planet, and we built some maps on top of them to figure out some interesting facts. The first is the so-called tree-o-meter, which means the ratio between pledged and planted trees. China is, of course, a very important country because a lot of people can plant a lot of trees. And they did. And they planted 99% of what they pledged. What about a smaller country like perhaps Benin in Africa? Of course, not so many people, but also a lot of trees and even a real good ratio. What about the United States? Wow. They planted twice as much they pledged. So this looks good, but let's change the perspective. The aim of Plant for the Planet is that everybody should plant 150 trees. On this map, you see the top 50 countries with the highest gross domestic product per capita and year. And if we start again in the United States, you see there live more than 300 million people, and they should plant 47 billion trees. But the poor facts you can see on the right side. Go to Germany, even worse. Italy, little better, also China. But the surprising winner here is Estonia with more than 20%. Yeah. The question is, why should we plant so many trees? And if you return to Germany here, you can see that the pledged trees in Germany can bind a lot of carbon dioxide. If we assume that a small car, and this is really a small car, produces nearly 3 tons of carbon dioxide a year, the pledged trees could compensate 19,000 cars, or you could travel 30 times around the world with the world's largest airliner. On the map, you can do even analysis on subregions, like I do here in Italy. So please, try out this map, and for me, it's now time to stop talking and start planting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you.
Good luck and a lot of success for your initiative.
Thank
you.
you.